This happened when I was in kindergarten. I had just one sister, so it wasn't like we had a grand Hina doll display case at home. We just had a small set that fit snugly in a glass case. During the Hina festival, we'd take that case out and display it in the living room, and then when it was over, we put it back on the shelf again. Still, it was a complete set, with the Emperor and Empress dolls, as well as the court lady. They also had a chest of drawers, an ox carriage, and some artificial cherry blossom and orange flowers, some wooden hishimochi, and various small tools. The dolls had eyes as thin as thread, and puckered lips. Depending on how you looked at them, they might appear to be smiling, but generally they looked expressionless. Personally, I wasn't very interested in the dolls, but I did love the miniature accessories. One night, I got up to go to the toilet. The toilet was on the other side of the living room, meaning I had to pass the doll case. And on my way back, I had a quick look inside it. In the dim light, all the dolls' heads seemed to be moving left and right, as though silently laughing. Their thin eyes were the same, but their puckered lips appeared to spread into a smile that felt incredibly evil. I almost tumbled back to my room, pulling the blankets up over my head and trembling until morning. Nothing strange happened after that, but ever since then, I've hated dolls. My parents still have those same dolls too. Can Hina dolls' heads even move side to side like that? They should be screwed on tight enough that they don't move. But honestly, even now, 30 years later, I'm still not brave enough to check. Hey guys, I'm your host, Tara A. Devlin, and welcome to this week's episode of Kowabana, true Japanese scary stories from around the internet. The latest volume of Kowabana, volume 16, is now available. If you want even more creepy tales of ghosts, haunted buildings, curses, mysterious rituals, and much more, make sure to check it out right now. And if you're looking for more to listen to, you can also find the audiobook for Sumikawa, The Haunting of Higanbana Heights, either on our Patreon, Fourth Wall store, or various audiobook outlets, including Spotify and Audible. So don't miss out on that either if you're still looking for more. This week, we're looking at a few tales of creepy, crafty dolls. This next one in particular is so infamous she's pretty much an urban legend in her own right now. A young man meets a cute girl on the train, but what he thinks will be a fun, innocent conversation is about to turn his entire world upside down. Who is this girl, really? Find out in Akemi-chan. This happened last May. One day, a friend I made soon after starting university called and asked if I wanted to come over to his place. He said B and C, some of our other friends, were also there. It was already past 9 p.m, and A's apartment was basically on the other side of the city. It would require me changing trains to get there, which would also take a bit of time. However, I didn't have anything else to do, and I was bored on a Saturday night, so I agreed to go. As I was waiting on the platform to change trains, suddenly I realized there weren't many other people there. Is it always like this on a Saturday night? I thought, but that was about all the attention I gave the matter. I got on the train, and it was also empty, other than 2 drunks. Again, I didn't think much of it as I sat down, pulled my phone out, and started scrolling. The 2 drunks got off at the next station, but then a girl around my age got on and sat opposite me. At first, I didn't notice her, but when I got bored of scrolling, I looked up and suddenly saw her. I realized she was actually rather cute. Her black hair reached her shoulders, and she looked rather grown up. Honestly, she was exactly my type. Now, while it wasn't like I'd never spoken to a girl before, I also had 0 dating history, so I wasn't brave enough to strike up a conversation with her. There's no way I could meet a girl like this, I thought. not realizing that I was staring at her. To make matters worse, she also looked up, and our eyes met. Oh shit, she's gonna think I'm a creep. Panicking, I looked away, pretending that I'd been looking out the window the whole time. But honestly, who was I trying to kid? My station was still 5 stops away. Shit, what should I do? Should I get off at the next station? Or would that look even more suspicious? I thought. But as I sat there, clearly conflicted, I heard a faint giggle. Eh? I looked straight ahead, and that girl was smiling at me. What's wrong? She then asked, as though enjoying herself. Eh? Seriously? This is just like a scene out of a comic or something, I thought. But I tried to play it off and act like it was no big deal. Oh, no, I was just looking outside, I said. You were looking at me, weren't you? She said, smiling, as she got up to sit next to me. There was no way. Secretly, I was overjoyed, but I gave in and agreed with her. Sorry, I was. And for the next 15 minutes or so, we chatted about this and that. Apparently, her name was Akemi-chan, and although she was in a different department, we went to the same university. Now, I didn't realize it at the time, but looking back on it later, I realized that Akemi-chan's behavior was rather odd. At first, she'd be talking about whatever the hot topic of the moment was, but then suddenly she started talking about something that happened several years ago. She seemed well informed of current events, but when I spoke about the recent earthquake, she had barely any response. Then she repeated the same stories, before suddenly falling silent. I was over the moon to finally make friends with a girl, so at the time I didn't really understand. But thinking about it now, it was like she hadn't actually seen or heard these things she was talking about herself. Rather, she'd gotten the information from somewhere else and memorized it. I don't know if that's the best way to describe it, but that was the strange and unnatural feeling I got from how she spoke. However, while I was still excited to talk to a girl, there was still one thing that bothered me at the time. Every time the train swayed slightly, there was this strange sound, kind of like hard, light plastic banging against something. I looked around, trying to find the source of the sound, but I couldn't see anything. What's wrong? Akemi-chan asked me, but I couldn't tell where the sound was coming from, and it wasn't like it was something serious either way, so I brushed it off. Oh, nothing, I said. It wasn't until later that I would discover the true source of that sound. As the train approached the stop before mine, the phone in Akemi-chan's bag started ringing. She opened it to grab her phone, but as she did, I saw what was inside. For a moment, I thought my heart was going to stop. Inside were 2 battered, rusty Chinese chef knives. These were clearly not something a teenage girl would normally be carrying around. I mean, I couldn't imagine anyone carrying these around while out and about, so it was clearly an odd sight. Akemi-chan soon closed her bag, but I had most definitely seen what was in there. And the whole time, that strange rattling sound continued. By that point, it was like I finally came back to my senses and tried to analyze the situation before me. Isn't it a bit weird that a cute girl would suddenly talk to me just because we looked at each other? There's no way such a thing would actually happen in real life. There's gotta be something up with this girl, I thought, suspicions arising in my mind. Well, it was less of a suspicion and more of a reality, really. Thinking it would be bad to get off at my actual destination, I decided to instead get off at the next stop. However, there was a chance she might still follow me, and if so, it would be hard to explain myself. Stuck between a rock and a hard place, I decided to get off at the next station right before the doors were about to close. A few moments later, the train pulled in at the station. Akemi-chan was still on her phone, but she was casting glances at me, so I couldn't act carelessly. Every time our eyes met, a chill ran down my spine, but I forced a smile and waited for the right moment. Right as the music started playing, indicating the train was about to leave again, I stood up. "Sorry, this is my stop," I said, and jumped off the train. Just as I'd hoped, Akemi-chan couldn't react in time, and the train took off with her still on it. I had, for the time being, managed to escape disaster, but I couldn't stop thinking about what a strange girl I'd run into, and also, what was I going to do now? I was pretty far from A's apartment, and I'd only been living in the area for the last 2 months, so I didn't know how to get there from here either. And supposing I got on at the next train, there was a chance that Akemi-chan might be waiting at the station. It was simply too dangerous. I had no choice but to call A. I asked him for his address, told him I'd explain later, and decided to take a taxi straight there. Considering the risks of running into Akemi-chan again, a few thousand yen was a small price to pay for safety. When I arrived at A's apartment, relief washed over me. Man, you have no idea what I've just been through. I ran into the craziest chick on the way here. Big cities are wild, I swear, I said, blowing this small event wildly out of proportion. Excitedly, I told the other 3 what happened. Yet, none of them believed me. "Liar," they all said with a laugh. But then, the doorbell rang. It was nearly 11 p.m. There was no way anyone would be visiting this late at night. It couldn't be. There's no way she could have followed me, I thought. Maybe it's Akemi-chan, B then joked. Hearing that, we all froze, including B himself. Or maybe it would be better to say they saw my pale face and how shaken I was when I heard that, and realized that I wasn't lying. "Hey, are you saying that all of that actually happened?" A asked. He said he'd checked the peephole, and, without making a sound, he made his way over to the front door, before returning a few moments later. "There's a really cute girl smiling by the front door," he said. This whole time, the doorbell kept ringing as well. "Wait, you weren't having us on?" C said. "Why did she follow you?" But I had no idea how she was even able to follow me in the first place. "Look, for now, I should check for myself whether it's really her or not," I said, tiptoeing to the door so I didn't make any sound. Then I looked through the peephole. And there stood Akemi-chan, a bewildered look on her face. This was bad, I thought. Why on earth did she follow me? We didn't get along that well, did we? All we did was chat on the train. This was absurd. Either way, I returned to the others and confirmed that it was indeed Akemi-chan. Then the 4 of us discussed what to do next. First things first, we couldn't exactly pretend not to be home. All the lights were on, and we'd been talking pretty loudly up until that point. It was obvious we were inside. Next, we discussed me hiding in the closet, while A dealt with her. If she asked about me, then he could pretend that he didn't know me, or that she'd made a mistake or something. But considering that she was, kinda weird, there was no guarantee that would work. Plus, she had dangerous weapons on hand. Opening the door was simply too dangerous. As we were talking, I then heard Akemi-chan calling from outside. "So-and-so-kun, you're in there, right? I saw you go in. Why did you run away? That's so mean. Explain yourself right now." "She followed you all the way here," A said, panicking. "And she even said your name. What are we gonna do?" "I got off at an earlier station and took a taxi here. So how on earth did she follow me?" I had so many questions, but as we were whispering to each other, this time we heard a strange sound coming from the door. It sounded like metal scraping against something, and it was incredibly unpleasant. A went over to the door again, looked outside, then came back. "She's crazy, man. She's scratching the door with a knife. I'm telling you, she's mad," he whispered. Akemi-chan kept calling my name and asking me to come outside and explain myself, but her words hardly matched her actions. All the noise must have pissed off the neighbor, however, as we heard him yelling through the door. "Shut the hell up! Do you know what time it is?" Then, both the metallic sound and Akemi-chan's voice stopped. For a moment, there was silence, but then it was followed by someone screaming, "Oh, what the hell?" and a door slamming. Then, the metallic scraping sound started again. What on earth was going on? Was the neighbor okay? Things were clearly getting worse. We tried to come up with a plan we could put into action, but we didn't think anything we could think up on the spot would actually work. While debating what to do, we then saw the lights of a police car outside. We didn't hear any siren, but it was clear that someone had called the police. I sighed in relief. We were saved. "Stop right there!" someone outside screamed. It was followed by the sound of running, and then everything fell silent. Before long, the doorbell rang. "Are you okay?" a police officer called out. It seemed we had indeed been saved. A opened the door and we explained everything. Apparently, Akemi-chan shoved one of the police officers aside, then ran behind the apartment building before jumping the fence and fleeing. The police were still in pursuit. I told him her name was Akemi-chan and that she went to the same university as us. Seemed she was after me for some reason, so the police said they'd send a patrol out near my apartment and gave me a number to call in an emergency before leaving. And apparently it was the neighbor who called the police. According to him, when he yelled at us, Akemi-chan silently turned and started swinging her knives towards him. So he panicked, ran inside, and called the police. Thankfully, he wasn't injured during the attack. Around the end of June, something else happened, but this post is getting rather long and it's quite late, so I'll share the rest on Sunday night. Oh, and while I remember, apparently there was nobody at our school who matched Akemi-chan's details, so in the end, police were unable to identify who she was. Okay, I got back a little earlier than expected, so let me continue with yesterday's story. However, this is pretty lengthy, so if I post it all at once, I'm afraid I'll trigger the board's consecutive post limit and I'll be banned from posting until tomorrow, so I'll cut it at a decent point and then continue in an hour or so. This is just Channel's system, so there's not much I can do about it. Please understand. So, it was late June, more than a month after the May incident, and by that point, the police had stopped patrolling as well. "If anything happens, give us a call," they said. I was careless, thinking nothing else would happen by this point. That was no doubt my first mistake. One night, I was kinda hungry, so I figured I'd drop by the convenience store near the station. I think it was around 10:30 p.m. or maybe 11. I stepped outside after I was done shopping, but even though the final train for the night hadn't yet passed, the station was oddly empty. This was exactly what happened when I first ran into Akemi-chan, but I didn't think much of it and started walking home. After walking down the dark streets for a bit, I approached the park I always passed. There, I could vaguely see someone sitting on the bench beneath the streetlights. However, they were pretty far away, and it wasn't like the streetlights were very bright, so I couldn't see who it was. What are they doing out here at this time of night? I thought as I walked by. But then the person seemed to notice me and got up. As soon as I realized this figure was a woman, I started to regret how stupid I was. And just as I thought, the person now coming towards me was Akemi-chan. "We finally meet again," she said, smiling happily at me. She was holding that rather large bag again, and it wasn't hard to imagine that those Chinese chef knives were still inside. At the time, I was rather confused, and I couldn't help but think that if this was anyone but Akemi-chan, then this would actually be a pretty sweet situation. I have no idea why that thought filled my head. But even while I was thinking it, I looked for ways to escape. Akemi-chan was still 4 or 5 meters away, and I didn't know what to call her, but she was wearing what looked like sandals with heels. Shoes that would clearly be hard to run in. Meanwhile, I was wearing sneakers, and in high school I was a member of the basketball team, so I was pretty confident in my ability to outrun her and shake her off. I figured it wouldn't be the best idea to run home, so I waited for the right moment, then turned 90 degrees and ran in the complete opposite direction as fast as I could. As I ran, I remembered what the police had told me. "Keep this number in your phone. Even if you can't talk, if you call it, we'll send a car to your apartment right away." Panicking, I reached into the pocket where I usually kept my phone, but it wasn't there. I checked my other pocket, but it wasn't there either. Come to think of it, I left the house with my phone still on the charger because I figured I'd be right back. How stupid I was. I must have run close to 1 kilometer or so. Looking back on it now, it was a little strange. I passed a few cars during that time, but I didn't see a single person out walking. Sure, it was 11 p.m, but it was odd. Was it just a coincidence? There was no way she could still be following me, so I stopped for a moment to gather my bearings. Then I realized something and decided to take a different route back to the park. What I realized was that this park oddly still had a public phone. There was a risk I might run into Akemi-chan on the way, but a definite public phone was too good to pass up, and I had to contact the police somehow. Being exceedingly cautious, I stopped at every single corner to make sure I was safe, so it took quite some time to get back to the park. When I got there, I checked the surroundings and then did a lap of the park itself, but I couldn't see a single soul. It appeared to be safe. Having confirmed that, I made my way to the public phone and opened the door. Then someone tapped me on the shoulder. There's no way. In the moment, I fell into the biggest pit of despair I'd ever felt before, but I still turned around with the faintest hope that it might be someone else. But there she was, Akemi-chan, with that huge smile on her face. Letting out a rather pathetic scream, I fell to my backside on the ground. Perhaps Akemi-chan found that funny as she giggled down at me. That smile really was cute, but that made it all the more creepy. Even in this pathetic situation, I tried to pretend like she wasn't getting to me. "How on earth do you keep finding me?" I spat. Then she giggled again. "Well, I am inside your pocket," she said. "Wherever you go, I'll know." What she was saying didn't make any sense. She really was crazy. I'd never run into an actual crazy person before, but this girl in front of me had to be one, right? As I sat there, dumbfounded, she continued. "It's in your rear right pocket." Seemed she wanted me to check it. I didn't know what she might do if I refused, so I lifted my hips a little and checked my rear right pocket. Inside was something thin and long, like a battery. Pulling it out, in the dim lights it looked just like a finger. Ah! I let out another pathetic scream and threw the finger to the ground. However, even as it left my hands, I realized that the finger didn't feel real. Rather, it appeared to be a mannequin finger. Akemi-chan smiled again. "You mustn't throw it away," she said, bending down to pick it up and then returning it to my pocket. Then she leaned in close to my ear. "If you throw me away again, I'll kill you." I wanted to say something back to her, but my mind went completely blank. All I could do was screw my face up in response. Shit, she's actually insane. I've got to do something or she's gonna kill me. But I was panicking so much that I couldn't think straight. "Well, it's not ideal for us to keep chatting here, so how about we go back to your place?" Akemi-chan then said, grabbing my arm and pulling me up. Now, I'm 175 centimeters tall and weigh 72 kilos, so I don't really have to explain why it's a bit weird that she was able to drag me away so easily. This was not the strength of a normal teenage girl. Absolutely flabbergasted at what was going on, Akemi-chan continued pulling my arm back towards my apartment. It seemed she had already figured out where I lived. It was then that I realized something. I could hear that strange plastic clicking sound from the train again. Akemi-chan was still smiling brightly, and then it hit me that with each step she took, I could hear that sound. It was coming from her. Akemi-chan seemed rather happy as we walked, and she was gripping my arm so tightly that it didn't appear she'd be letting go anytime soon. I had to figure out a way to break free of her grasp before we reached my apartment, but nothing good came to mind. Besides, she literally had superhuman strength. It would be impossible for me to shake her off. And then, before I could come up with anything, we arrived at my apartment. As soon as we went inside, Akemi-chan immediately started going through all my stuff. "Guys' rooms really are messy, huh?" she said as she looked around. But I was on edge and couldn't calm down. She was in a good mood now, but who knew when she might suddenly flip a switch and kill me if I upset her somehow. "This place is a pigsty, so let me clean it for you, okay?" she said. Normally, this situation would be peak, right? A girl you've just started seeing comes over for the first time and says something like that. But this girl was insane and had some large Chinese chef knives in her bag. I was nothing more than some pathetic prey caught in her web. With that on my mind, Akemi-chan continued making that odd clicking sound as she started sorting out the pile of magazines and comics and textbooks in the corner. Then she brushed her hair away from her neck, probably because it was getting in the way. When she did, I saw something unbelievable. A faint line ran all the way to the back of her head, but right above the nape of her neck, there was a small section that looked like it had been chipped off. It looked exactly like two halves that didn't fit together correctly. And it was this part that was making the clicking sound every time she moved. I saw it only for a moment, but I most definitely wasn't seeing things. There was very clearly a seam on the back of Akemi-chan's neck. I was so confused. What the hell? What on earth is in front of me right now? I thought. I'd just thought of her as a nut job, but now I realized she might not even be human. As I stared at her neck, trying to figure it out, she seemed to realize I was looking at her. "What? You're making me feel shy," she said with a small grin, before going back to what she was doing. Then, some of the textbooks and dictionaries on the shelf above her, that she was probably going to sort out later, fell and hit her on the head with a loud bang. "Ow," she said, rubbing her head where the books had hit her and looking at me like she'd messed up. But the sight of her was truly bizarre. That seam on the back of her neck was now clearly disjointed. "Ah," she muttered, and after popping her neck back into place, she continued sorting out the books and magazines like nothing had even happened. I panicked. What on earth is she? What the hell am I looking at? Nothing made any sense. The only thing that was for sure was that this girl in front of me wasn't human. Despite my panic, I thought about what to do next. Then, I caught sight of my phone charging by the bed. That's it! The police officer said that if I called them, even if I couldn't talk, they would send a car over. I moved as naturally as I could so as not to arouse Akemi-chan's suspicion, and looked down at my phone. "Don't you dare touch that," she said without turning around. "You're kidding me. How on earth did she know?" I remained frozen on the spot, and then Akemi-chan stood up, walked over to me, yanked my phone off the charger, and threw it into her bag. Then she returned to cleaning my room in silence. I had to think of some way to get out of this, but I was so shaken that my mind refused to work. I looked around the room and spotted the electric kettle that was still full of water. An idea hit me, something I would have never normally thought of. There was still a fair bit of hot water in that kettle. If I hit her with it, then... I wouldn't exactly call myself a feminist, but I would never normally entertain the idea of hurting a woman. But considering the situation I was in, and the fact that Akemi-chan didn't even appear to be human, let alone a man or woman, well, I had to do what I had to do. Readying myself, I grabbed the kettle and, with a scream, smashed it across Akemi-chan's head as hard as I could. She went flying into the wall across from us and collapsed to the ground. I went over to check on her, but then she sat up. "Ow! What are you doing?" she responded, as though I'd just given her a friendly nudge and she was pretending to be upset about it. I froze in terror at the sight of her. It wasn't just her strange response, but I don't know how to explain it, but when she sat up, the part of her face from her nose or eye sockets up just fell to the floor. There was nothing left but the area beneath her nose. And it was this half of a face that was talking. There was just no way. The situation was so strange that I couldn't move. And then I quickly came back to my senses, threw the kettle I was still holding at her, then turned and ran out of the apartment. Once I reached the road outside, I turned around and was greeted with another horrifying sight. My apartment was on the second floor, but Akemi-chan was leaning out the window with one of her knives in one hand and holding part of her head in the other. Looking right at me, she jumped down to the ground. I was so scared and panicked that I feared I might wet myself, and despite my age, I ran aimlessly down the road as fast as I could with tears in my eyes. Behind me, I could hear something rattling as it chased me. It was undoubtedly Akemi-chan. If she catches me, I'm done for, I thought. But then I remembered what she said earlier. If you throw me away again, I'll kill you. What did she mean by me? Was this finger her actual body? It didn't make sense, but this seemed to be the key somehow. That being said, I didn't know what to do with it. If I didn't throw it away, she would likely continue chasing me forever. But if I did throw it away, she said she'd kill me. Still, considering the circumstances, she would likely kill me once she caught up regardless of whether I threw the finger away or not. And if so, then the problem wasn't whether to throw away the finger or not, but rather how to throw it away. As I thought it over, I reached a nearby main road, and about 100 meters away, spotted a shrine gate. That's it, I thought without any real evidence that this was the correct way to go about it. I was exhausted, so with the last of my strength, I crossed the road, walked under the shrine gate, took the finger out of my pocket, and then tossed it into the main building. At that exact same moment, I heard a car slamming on its brakes behind me, followed by a rather loud bang. Looking through the shrine gate, a car had stopped in the middle of the road. Did it, perhaps, hit Akemi-chan? Nervously, I walked over, and a man in his 30s was standing by the car, talking to someone on his phone. He was probably calling the police or an ambulance, but strangely, as I looked around, I realized there was nobody else around. "What happened?" I asked the guy. "I just hit someone," he said. "Or I thought I did, but as you can see, there's nobody here. But I figured I should probably call the police anyway." Considering the timing of it all, there was no doubt in my mind that he hit Akemi-chan. I glanced at the side of the road, and there, numerous broken objects lay scattered everywhere. Nervously, I approached them, and they were the broken pieces of a doll. Judging by the clothing on the torso and legs, it was undoubtedly Akemi-chan. I was confused. Before me were clearly the remains of a doll, but they looked cheap. Shouldn't they look more realistic? What on earth was this? What was going on? Did I really get rid of her by throwing the real her into the shrine? Was it really that easy all along? I was so confused. But that didn't change the reality of what was before me. And before long, the police arrived. In the end, I was not just a witness, but also a victim as well. So they asked me all sorts of questions. But it didn't exactly make a lot of sense, so they didn't believe me. The guy who hit what looked like Akemi-chan was so baffled that he just couldn't understand what was going on, and he was getting more and more worked up as he talked to the police. But there was one more strange thing. Dolls normally have joints that connect their arms and legs and such to the torso, right? But this one had no joints whatsoever, confusing even the police. Meaning, it was a mystery as to how it was all connected to make the shape of a doll. Considering how Akemi-chan looked, Was there something inside of her? All sorts of thoughts went through my mind, but even now, I still have no idea. And the police took the doll remains as evidence back with them, so I have no idea what happened to them after that. It may be a rather disappointing ending, but nothing else happened to me after that. When I got home, it seemed somebody called the police about all the noise, so they came to see me again. They took Akemi-chan's bag as evidence, but apparently there was nothing in there that they could use to identify her. However, they later told me something strange about her phone. Akemi-chan's phone had been cancelled several years earlier, so technically it shouldn't have worked anymore. It was just dead weight that couldn't make or receive calls. I never saw her again after that, but ever since then, I've been too scared to go near empty or unpopulated places. As for the doll, well, you can certainly let your mind run away trying to explain it, but I don't want to write down my mere speculations. I'm also scared that any strange thoughts might actually come true, so I'll leave it up to you reading this to imagine for yourself. And that's that. And finally, in case you hadn't fully gotten the warning yet, this next story is yet another reminder not to mess with dolls. They can and will get their revenge. Find out why in Grandmother's Heirloom Doll. When my grandmother passed away and we were going through her things, my mother found a doll. It wasn't an expensive-looking Japanese doll, but rather a little girl with round eyes and her hair and face made out of fabric. She thought it was cute, and after getting permission from the rest of the family, she gave it to me. I'm a seamstress, while my sister works in apparel and my mother a kimono fabric shop. So, because the doll had some rather plain, discoloured cotton clothes, we worked together to fix that. My mother supplied the fabric and silk. My sister dyed them, and I sewed them into a kimono for the doll. It was red with a peony pattern and reddish-brown belt, while the decorative collar was light green and made of pure silk. I then attached a pale camellia to her hair. We joked about how it was just like playing with dolls again, and placed it next to our mother's orchid. The next day, my younger sister laughed and told us she had a dream that the doll thanked her for the new outfit. A few days later, one of my mother's acquaintances visited with her daughter, and apparently the girl started crying that she wanted that doll. My mother apologized and told her that it was a memento, so she couldn't have it. So the girl apparently grabbed the doll and threw it to the floor, knocking over the orchids as she did so as well. "Kids will be kids," the mother said before leaving. My mother picked up the doll, apologized to it, and cleaned up the flowers. A few days after that, there was a rather large traffic accident in Kyoto, and the girl who threw the doll was injured. At first, we thought it was just a coincidence. But not too long ago, that mother visited my mother again and informed her that her daughter was now out of the hospital. She asked if she could have that doll to give to her as a get-well present, but again, my mother refused. However, small girls do like playing with dolls, so my mother then told her that if I was okay with it, then she could have it. However, I refused. I had no intention of giving it to a girl who had thrown it around in the first place. "But she said she wants it," that mother complained. Then she herself picked it up and threw it to the ground. Maybe it's hereditary. This slightly bent the doll's legs. A few days later, that mother was in an accident. It wasn't life-threatening, but she was paralyzed below the waist. It honestly frightened me a little. A big thank you and shout out to this week's Kami tier members, Scarly and Emerald. It's thanks to your support, along with everyone else, that I'm able to keep doing this show, so thank you very much. Don't forget to check out Kowabana Volume 16, out right now, and check out our merchandise store at kowabana-shop.fourthwall.com. And if you'd like to chat about this week's stories, come and join us in the Kowabana Discord. You can find that link in the description or on kowabana.net. You can also check out our Patreon at patreon.com/TaraADevlin for exclusive bonus stories and extras, or our YouTube channel at youtube.com/KowabanaJapan for all sorts of Japanese horror you won't find anywhere else. Thanks guys, stay safe, and I'll see you again next time for even more Kowabana, true Japanese scary stories from around the internet. Want even more scary stories? Head over to kowabana.net for new translations every week. You can also join our Patreon for exclusive stories you won't find anywhere else. Head over to kowabana.net now.